2 of buying an airplane. In part 1, we talked about our mission, budget, maintenance, picked a model, financed, insured it, and figured out how we were going to store it. We'll jump right back in here and getting right onto the fun part, the hunt. Remember to stick around to the end of the tour of this new to me airplane.
Now that you've settled on a few makes, models, and years comes the fun part, the hunt. Don't be in a rush. An airplane transaction has a lot of steps that take varying amounts of time, so don't rush it. If you're in a rush, consider using a broker. Don't expect to find an airplane that suits your needs in your local area. Expect to have to travel to go see it and fly it. The online airplane marketplaces I've searched the most are Trade-A-Plane, Controller, and Barnstormers. The other places to really focus your search are the forums. I found both of my airplanes in the for sale listings on Beach Talk. It's free and convenient to the seller with lots of eager eyes, so a lot of the time you'll see a lot of great listings here that never make their way to commercial listing websites. Be prepared that your budget probably won't buy you everything you want. If it does, beware of the damage history or high time motor or corrosion. So let's talk about each of these. First, damage history can be okay if the airplane was fixed professionally and has demonstrated a lot of issue-free flying since the damage. A common one is a gear-up landing and a retract. I'm not too concerned about it if the repair shop is reputable and it occurred a while ago. I won't define that, but look for, I don't know, at least a few years and a few hundred hours. Look at old damage that was well repaired a long time ago as an opportunity, since it could help bring down your purchase price of the plane. Watch out for prop strikes and also corrosion repairs. Next, engine time. This is a complicated one I'm going to summarize by saying most of the aircraft's value is tied to how much time the engine or engines have left. This is why you might find some seemingly affordable twins. Now there's differing opinions on the value of sticking to an engine's manufacturer's recommended TBO, time between overhaul, but everyone agrees that engines' lifespans are not infinite. Many engines have a TBO of 1,500 or 1,700 hours, and an overhaul costs between $20,000 for smaller engines and $40,000 for bigger 6-cylinders. But listen, most people get 20 plus years out of an engine. Now, Continental engines typically need top overhauls at some point. Lycomings, not so much. A top overhaul is pretty much what it sounds like, an overhaul of the components outside of the crankcase. So the cylinders or jugs, the valves, etc. Okay, that was super quick, but I want to move on to the last major thing to watch out for, which is corrosion. Before putting eyes on an aircraft, there are two main clues that can tip you off that an aircraft is at higher risk of corrosion. One, a lack of recent flying puts an engine at risk of corrosion since the innards aren't getting lubricated frequently. And two, where has the aircraft spent a lot of its life? Obviously, more humid and salty environments are more likely to cause corrosion than arid, but that's no reason to avoid shopping for a nice Florida flyer. You'll want to put eyes on it, and more importantly, trained eyes of a mechanic in a pre-buy inspection. Avionics are another huge driver of aircraft cost. Get familiar with what some of the avionics are that people list. Heads up, people will list this piece of junk as an asset in the laundry list of trash in their airplane. If you've done some research on how much avionics cost, in the case of thinking of upgrading, double that cost. The labor rates are insane. Plus, inevitably, they'll find bad wiring or a bad antenna that needs replaced. Now that said, breathing new avionics life into a classic airplane, if you can afford it, can be a lot of fun. For me, I'd rather buy the plane with the avionics I want already installed and let the previous owner eat the exorbitant installation fees. The avionics I value most are an engine monitor and strong radios. A little lower on the list are an autopilot and ADI. Notice I didn't say GPS. Again, I treat IFR as a contingency, so this means my iPad is A-OK for 99% of my flying. I just want a good ADI to keep my right side up if I inadvertently fly into a cloud or need to fly at night. The last thing I look for is an ADS-B out transponder. I look at ADS-B in as nice to have since there's a lot of cheap and easy ways to receive data. This one's pretty ugly, but hey, I built it myself for like $50.
I'm so happy to have this episode sponsored by this amazing aviation jewelry line. The Ease Collective handcrafts these sleek gold or sterling silver necklaces right here in the USA. These gorgeous necklaces make a great gift for yourself or that special pilot or co-pilot in your life. Of course, my personal favorites are the F-15 and V-tail. Use discount code CD10 for 10% off for Clear Direct viewers, and there's always free shipping in the US. See the entire hanger at theeasecollective.com/aviation.
Okay, so your mouth is watering and you're ready to contact a few sellers. I make a Google spreadsheet, which I'll share with you to keep your candidates organized. When you're all organized, start with your favorite aircraft and ensure you have the right mindset, which is what's wrong with this airplane and why does it appear that I can afford it? Do not get your hopes up to the point of overlooking major issues. If you don't find any at a glance, be a sleuth and find what's wrong. It's not to say that you won't get around it. The two most common reasons I find airplanes that appear to be good deals are that the plane hasn't flown or has some damage history. Those things aren't immediately obvious from listings. Contact the seller via email or phone and first ask if the plane is still available. If it is, start by asking some basic questions to fill in your spreadsheet. If things are still looking pretty good and you haven't found the disqualifier yet, now's the time to do a logbook review. Request to see the logbooks, and if the seller has their act together, they'll be hung on a website or they'll email you a link to the files on their Dropbox or Google Drive. Less savvy sellers will just email you megabytes of huge files, so that's okay. If the seller acts put out by this request, run the other way. They're hiding something or not motivated to sell their plane. This is just a common practice of selling an airplane. Minimally, there are 3 books maintained with every aircraft: an airframe, engine, and propeller log. I always start at the end of the engine logbook and look at the latest entry. Most likely it's the annual inspection. I look to see if the cylinder compressions are above 70 and see what discrepancies were fixed. I also see what ADs were referenced and complied with. This is huge and will potentially expose big issues. On one airplane I was really hopeful about. The mechanic wrote that AD XYZ was complied with and the next inspection was due in 50 hours. What's driving an inspection less frequently than 100 hours? So I opened up the AD on the FAA's website and saw that this particular manufacturer's cylinder had cracking issues which drove that 50-hour inspection. But I looked even closer and saw that the cylinders were required to be replaced after 12 years in service. Back to the logbook. I found that the cylinders were installed at overhaul 23 years ago. That can't be right. Was the airplane flying illegally? Hang on, you probably don't know something here. So I did a little bit more digging and learned that the AOPA applied for an alternative method of compliance, or AMOC, and successfully got a few more years out of these cylinders. But they still had to be replaced after 19 years. So yeah, this airplane had been flying out of compliance with an AD for 4 years. I half expected the seller to just not reply to my email pointing this out, but he was thankful and embarrassed. Now, this isn't very common, luckily, since I've found mechanics to be pretty damn on top of ADs. Now, other things to look at in the engine log: ensure annual or 100-hour inspections have been accomplished regularly, and note how much flying has occurred between each via the tachometer note. I like to see at the very least 30 hours a year. Okay, over the airframe logbook. I'm primarily looking for corrosion and damage repair. I like to see rubber items swapped out recently, such as gap seals, door seals, and fuel cells, unless the plane has wet wings. I also like to see occasional landing gear rigging, flap motor and landing gear motor overhauls, but those aren't vital. The next thing I look for is proper documentation of modifications. A typical one for early model Bonanza, for example, is the baggage compartment. They wanted it to look like a newer one and extend it a little bit, despite the center of gravity issues. My first Bonanza had this done, and there was no record of it in the paperwork. So the next step, pull the aircraft records from the FAA to see if it's there. I would absolutely recommend doing this once you're in escrow on any airplane. It costs only $10 and is great peace of mind. In fact, my escrow title company did it for me. Now back to my last Bonanza. It didn't have the modification form 337 filed with the FAA. I didn't catch it in pre-buy. So at my first annual, my mechanic wouldn't even touch the airplane. What a freaking nightmare. So I had to fly my Bonanza from Oregon to Kansas City just to find a mechanic that would look at it. Anyway, can you tell I like to learn things the hard way? This is why I'm sharing this stuff with you. All right, the logbooks look pretty good and you're ready to make an offer. Technique only here. I try not to make an offer before I see the airplane and ideally fly the airplane. But sometimes that's just not possible. So let's assume the airplane is far away and you'd like to make an offer first and add contingencies. So let's talk about the price first. How do you know what to offer? There's no Kelly Blue Book for aircraft, right? Well, actually there kind of is. It's called VREF and you can get a detailed valuation on any airplane. Now, VREF has sponsored previous episodes, but I didn't want them to sponsor this one, so there's no conflict of interest here. VREF has been a great tool for me, no kidding, to keep me from making a big mistake. I always start when I offer at the VREF value and really don't move much from there. Let the seller come down to meet you. Be ready to walk and lose the airplane. I've lost many and tell myself that, hey, I'll let others pay too much. This comes down, once again, to patience and mitigating hopes. Email your offer to the seller and add the following statement. Contingent upon further document review, test flight, and pre-purchase inspection. An email offer is not legally binding, but I like to add that just to manage the seller's expectations. Don't forget to budget for sales tax if you live in a state with sales tax. It can get a little tricky with the tax man when considering where delivery takes place. I'll link an article below for more information on that. Suffice to say, I bought my first airplane in California, sales tax, and flew it and kept it in Oregon. Didn't know sales tax. Anyway, after haggling over the price, hopefully you come to an agreement, and once you do, you'll make things official by writing and signing a purchase agreement. Be careful about signing a seller's broker agreement, as they're typically stacked in the seller's favor, as you would expect. Feel free to engage with the broker to see if they'll change the troubling language. If it's just you and the private party seller, offer to write it up. I'll link a template below. Sweet. Okay, now you can get a little more excited, but shift your mindset now to what are we going to find that's going to make me walk? Unless you're buying with cash, call your lender and begin that process. They'll have some hoops for you to jump through, even if you're planning on doing your own pre-buy. Check out my series on that topic, by the way. Chances are your lender will make you have an AMP sign off on certain things. My lender also required that it was a different mechanic than signed off on the last annual. Start calling around and getting on somebody's schedule. A full pre-purchase inspection can cost upwards of $1,000, but think of it as an insurance policy. One opportunity is that if the plane's annual is coming due or if it's overdue, offer to split that annual with the seller, which will satisfy your pre-purchase inspection, and now you got a fresh annual. The long pole in the tent is getting on that mechanic's schedule. If you haven't seen or flown the plane yet, make a plan to do that. On the day of the closing, there shouldn't be really anything left to figure out, just ensuring money flows and keys and logs get exchanged. Don't forget the logbooks. If you can manage it, try not to fly with those logbooks in case something tragic happens. Check the weather NOTAMs and fly your awesome new-to-you aerospace conveyance to its new home. After you make all your proud social media posts, register your plane with the FAA and your state aviation authority. You guessed it, they're linked below. And that's it, folks. That's all there is to it. As always, I love hearing from you and read all your comments, so please let me know how your experience went or if you have any questions. Okay, I promise you a tour of my new-to-me plane, a 1964 S35 Bonanza with good bones, decent avionics, newly overhauled motor, and seriously shitty interior.
All right, selfie mode. Pretty from afar, but you know, far from pretty. I mean, she's patriotic, right? Red, white, and blue. Original paint scheme. All right, huffing and puffing because I just pushed her out of the way of the fuel tanks. It's not very busy. Although the pattern is, we're supposed to get a snowstorm, so everybody's trying to get their 3 bounces. But okay, so 1964 S35 Bonanza V-tail. What's unique about this plane is it was, I believe it was the first model to come with a 5th seat, which I have. It's not installed. Most people don't install it because they don't use it because of the useful load issues we're talking about, but it could, you know, it's just a little cramped back there. Maybe I'll show it to you, but interior, we'll get to that in a second. Other things, it's got an IO 520. It's got GAMI injectors. Like I mentioned, it was overhauled only about 2 or 3 years ago. And so it's only has less than 200 hours on it, which kind of was what I was looking for. I was kind of looking for a turnkey airplane with respect to engine and avionics. Interior, not so much. Upgrades, not many. There is this LED, where is it? There it is. The LED, I'm not sure, it must be a Wayland LED upgrade on the upper landing. I believe that's, yeah, that's landing light versus the taxi light. So that's nice to have. Hope I didn't say that wrong. Other upgrades, you can see the speed slope windshield, getting a couple extra knots with the little extra slope on the windshield. I believe these later model, I say later model, Bonanzas came with the nice wingtips that the earlier models kind of upgraded to later on, as well as the Stinger tail. Get a profile view of that. A little couple extra knots out of this. I also checked very thoroughly on the the rotovators. They're magnesium, they're susceptible to corrosion, and they're not making them anymore. So they are like gold. So they look good. Fingers crossed on that. We'll keep an eye on everything there. But everything else outside, the gap seals look really good. One of the fuel tanks was recently done. So the lights, other than that LED, are looking pretty crazed over and in need of some love. Speaking of which, let me show you this god-awful coffee grinder of a rotating beacon. And then also, I was unaware that these planes had underbelly, big old wart, parasitic drag inducing beacon. So I want to check out to see if there's a replacement kit for that. I know it'll cost a couple grand, so again, kind of later on down the road. The two things I really want to get done quickly are put in shoulder restraints, shoulder harness, and headrests, because I think those really did a fantastic job in helping save us, or at least mitigate, reduce injuries in my ditching. So anyway, that's it on the exterior. Are you ready for it? Let's go.
In fact, when I traveled to Las Vegas to fly it, the interior turned me off to the point of I didn't even make a lowball offer. But a couple of months later, the owner was pretty eager to sell and reached out and asked me to make him an offer. So we came to an agreement, and now I have a plane that meets my highest priorities. Low engine time, great useful load, ADS-B out, good radios, and it goes fast. There's no damage history or corrosion. So the trade-offs I made were, you know, this historically bad interior, no autopilot, no upgraded ADI.
Okay, interior is so bad that there's sheepskin that is looking worn on it as well. I mean, just look at this. I haven't cleaned it out yet. This is kind of how I got it. It needs vacuumed. It needs just junk. There was this box. I guess the tachometer was overhauled. He did me a favor and left me the trash. Thanks. But look at the lack of upholstery on the hat deck back there, and then also underneath the rotor pedals down there. So, I mean, come on. It's what, 57 years oldish? And okay, so let's talk avionics. Here's one thing that's super aggravating is the mic push to talk button is on the right side of the pilot side yoke. Actually, both sides. I'm coming to realizing these are the needle ones that hurt your thumb. So I want to get that rerouted over to the left side. That's obviously very awkward as you're trying to hold onto the throttle and fly it with your left hand. All right, so some of you sharp eyes have already identified some of the avionics. I've got an L3 Lynx 9000. I think it's the basic one. I don't think there's any Bluetooth or ADS-B transmission within the aircraft, but it is ADS-B in and out, which is bonus. Mentioned I didn't need in, but that's great. It's pretty nice. Actually, the seller, when we were flying home, flying home caravanning. He was on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and he was asking me to give him some weather up ahead of him, and so I looked up the ICAO and passed along the weather. So that's pretty darn handy to have with the ADS-B in. The GTN 650, I had this in my last aircraft. This is awesome. This isn't the upgraded XI version, but good enough on this original one. It's fantastic, and I'm really excited to review this for Mark at PS Engineering. This is the let's see, the PS Engineering PMA 8000 Bluetooth PT. Got that right there, so it has some extra features. I don't know if it has 3D audio. We'll have to check in all the features here. I'll learn and do a video on that. Okay, here's one of the things I'm most excited about is the EDM 830 from JPI. I just filled up my fuel for the first time, topped off tanks, and I'm going to learn real quick before I start how to tell this that I have full fuel. And it is apparently it is accurate to within about 1/10 of a gallon. That's just anecdotally speaking from the seller. So I'm really excited about that, but everything else is pretty basic. Like I mentioned, the ADI is original. The one switch position I would change is the Avionics Master down here, which is kind of a, for me, odd place to put it. I'd rather have it be front and center. That's the tour of November 40 Golf Mike. Follow me on FlightAware, watch what I'm up to, and happy flying! Talk to you guys in the next one. Until then, good.